On August 15, 1971, Richard Nixon gave a 15-minute speech that destroyed the global monetary system. He called it temporary. It's been 53 years, and the world has never been the same. But the real reason he did it had nothing to do with the economy, and everything to do with war. Welcome back to Past to Profit, where history meets money. To understand 1971, you need to go back to 1944. World War II was ending, and the United States held over 70% of the world's monetary gold. So when 44 countries met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, they created a new system. The dollar became the world's reserve currency. Here's how it worked. Every major currency was pegged to the dollar, and the dollar was pegged to gold. $35 per ounce. Foreign governments could exchange their dollars for gold anytime they wanted. It was a promise, backed by America's gold reserves. For America, it was power. The world's financial system now ran through the Federal Reserve. Every global transaction, every trade, denominated in dollars. But the promise had to be kept. The gold had to be there, and for 2 decades it was, until the 1960s changed everything. In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson launched 2 wars. Vietnam abroad, the Great Society at home, troops, equipment, bombs, Medicare, Medicaid, education, all incredibly expensive. Johnson wanted both, guns and butter, and he didn't want to raise taxes. So the government borrowed and printed. Dollars flooded the economy. Inflation crept up. But there was a problem. Under Bretton Woods, every dollar was supposed to be backed by gold. Print more dollars. You needed more gold. America didn't have more gold. It was losing gold. France was the first to notice. In 1965, President Charles de Gaulle started demanding gold in exchange for dollars. Other countries followed. Germany, Switzerland, the Netherlands. By the late 60s, U.S. gold reserves were draining fast. In 1950, America held over 20,000 tons of gold. By 1971, less than 9,000 tons. The promise was breaking, but the Vietnam War wasn't stopping. The spending wasn't slowing, and raising taxes, politically impossible. So America faced a choice. Stop the war, stop the spending, or stop pretending the dollar was backed by gold. Nixon chose option 3. On August 15, 1971, Nixon interrupted television programming. He announced a temporary suspension of dollar convertibility into gold. Foreign governments could no longer exchange dollars for gold. The promise was over. Nixon framed it as protection against speculators, as necessary, patriotic. But the real reason was simple. America didn't have enough gold, and it needed to keep printing money to fund the war. The gold standard didn't fail. It was sacrificed. Without the gold anchor, the dollar became pure fiat currency, backed only by trust, by faith. The consequences were immediate. Within months, the dollar's value fell. Inflation spiked. By the mid-70s, it was out of control. Oil prices quadrupled. Gas lines stretched for blocks. Wages stagnated while prices soared. Stagflation. High inflation and high unemployment at the same time. The 70s became an economic nightmare. And it started with Nixon's decision. But here's the truth. Nixon didn't have a choice. Because the gold standard and global empire are incompatible. You can't have both. Empires are expensive. Troops overseas. Bases in foreign countries. Wars in distant lands. All of it costs money. Under a gold standard, you can't just print money. You're constrained by how much gold you have. So every empire faces the same decision. Sound money or global power. And no empire ever picks sound money. Rome debased its coins to pay for expansion. Spain inflated its currency after looting silver. Britain went off gold during World War I. America did the same in '71. Not because of corruption, but because the system demanded it. The gold standard was never going to survive the Cold War, because the Cold War required infinite spending, and gold is finite. Nixon just made it official. 53 years later, we're still living with the consequences. After 71, the dollar became the world's first purely fiat reserve currency. No gold backing, just trust in the US government. And for decades, that trust held. The dollar remained dominant. Global trade ran on it. But that dominance came with a cost. America had to run perpetual trade deficits. Factories moved overseas. Jobs disappeared. Debt piled up. This is the Triffin paradox. To be the world's reserve currency, America had to sacrifice its own economic health. Nixon's decision proved it. The gold standard was incompatible with reserve currency status. And once the gold was gone, there was no limit. The Fed could print as much as needed. Bailouts, stimulus, wars, deficits, all funded by creating dollars out of thin air. Today, we're seeing the fragility again. Global debt is over $300 trillion. Central banks printed trillions during the pandemic. Inflation came roaring back. And for the first time since the 70s, people are questioning the dollar's dominance. China and Russia are trading in their own currencies. BRICS nations are exploring alternatives. Central banks are buying gold at the fastest pace in 50 years. The world is moving away from dollar dependence because they see what France saw in '65. The numbers don't add up. The debt is unsustainable. The printing can't go on forever. Nixon's decision bought America 50 years of unchallenged monetary power. But that power is fading. And this time, there's no gold standard to go back to. Because once you break a promise like that, you can't unbreak it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Nixon didn't kill the gold standard to help the economy. He killed it to preserve American power. And it worked. For half a century, the United States has spent beyond its means. Financed wars without immediate cost. Run deficits without consequence. All because the dollar is backed by nothing but faith. But history teaches us that fiat currencies always fail. Every single one. Not sometimes. Always. The Roman denarius. The French assignat. The Weimar papier-mark. The Zimbabwean dollar. The Venezuelan bolivar. All started as trusted currencies. All ended as worthless paper. The dollar is different, they say. America is too big to fail. Maybe. But that's what they said about the gold standard too. Until the day it wasn't. 53 years ago, Nixon made a choice. Empire over sound money. Power over promises. And we're still living in that world. A world where money is debt. Where currencies have no anchor. Where trust is the only thing holding the system together. And when that trust finally breaks, we'll learn the same lesson every empire learns. You can have sound money, or you can have empire, but you can't have both. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and on Path to Profit, we'll show you where to look.